Hey, welcome back to Common Sense OT Security, where we talk about OT security problems, events, concepts, etc., through the lens of common sense, which usually offers refreshing new views. So today, I want to discuss a side of artificial intelligence that plays into our field, even though it has nothing to do with analytics or vulnerability management or threat anomaly detection. It's about the question how AI may transform our knowledge and our thinking about OT security. And here's the backstory, how I got into that. So a couple of weeks ago, I was asked to do a talk at a conference, the Intellect conference in Galveston, Texas. And when thinking what to do about that talk, I was in a lazy mood and thought, well, I'm just going to check out the AI because, as you will most likely know, the AI today will generate a slide deck for you. So you don't need to invest all the hard work in thinking on your own and all the research. No, the AI does that for you. Um, so that's what I did. And the title of my talk was OT Security is Broken. And so I simply asked Grok in this case. I haven't checked OpenAI, so I think I don't. Maybe or maybe not. ChatGPT would have come up with a different line of thought. But let me show you what Grok came up with. So for me, it was quite an interesting experience because I think you really learn something about how AI presently works in this present stage. So this is the slide deck that Grok had prepared for me. And the only thing I did was, so I copied and pasted the text from Grok, the output, and then just dumped it into PowerPoint. And this is what I got. Excuse me, title slide. OT security is broken. A systemic crisis. Now, this is already interesting because my request was simply do a presentation titled OT security is broken. So the systemic crisis, that is already something that the AI invented. And I think it's it's already interesting because how would the AI know that this is a systemic crisis? And you will see how it believes to know when we go further down. Subtitle: Why operational technology security fails and what's at stake. Visual image of a breached industrial control system dashboard or a cyber attack warning. Show me an image of a breached industrial control system dashboard. What would that look like? Well, as I think we can all imagine what the AI has in mind, something like with add on, I don't know, icons of bugs or something in red. But because certainly if you would look at a compromised industrial control system, you cannot distinguish it visually from a properly operating control system. There is no visual difference. So that's a little bit odd. Or a cyber attack warning. Again, we can all imagine what that will look like. Alert, cyber attack. You all have seen those crazy images. Speaker notes. Now we get to the meat on the bone. Open with a hook. In 2021, the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack halted fuel supply across the US East Coast. That wasn't an anomaly. It was a system of a broken OT security ecosystem. So if you're like me, this really doesn't surprise you because when you watch any of the videos on OT security or listen to conference talks, pretty often they rub the Colonial Pipeline attack in your face. And why do I point that out? Because the irony is the Colonial Pipeline attack wasn't an OT attack. As simple as that. So it was simply quote unquote, an IT attack that did not affect any OT system at the victim. That's a fact. And still it is brought up as the latest poster child of OT attacks, which is blatant nonsense. And what I would like you to consider is simply ask yourself, why is that the case? Why are they using an IT attack as the poster child of OT security hacks? And the answer is pretty simple, because they don't have anything similar as a real OT attack that they can show. They have nothing to show. That is why they shove the Colonial attack in your face. As simple as that. As silly as it is. And I mean, it even gets more bizarre when you think it through. So consider this statement. It was a system of a broken OT security ecosystem. That is blatant nonsense, because since no OT system was even involved in the Colonial attack, just imagine what it could actually be that the OT security at Colonial was top notch. Everything up to patch, networks fully segregated. It could have been that way, and the outcome of the attack would have been identical, because OT operations were halted deliberately, since the poor guys were unable to issue any invoices. They couldn't process orders, etc. Right? So the business process was disrupted, and therefore they decided to shut down operations. And that would have been identical if the OT security at Colonial would have been the best that you can imagine. So my bottom line is there is zero logic behind that statement, and certainly also zero fact. It's totally made up. It's an argument that fails the basic test of common sense. Okay, let's continue. Oh, you can almost already have expected that one too. So slide 2, what is OT security? And I find this rather appalling in a way, because if you tell me, okay, now I'm going to present to you why OT security is broken, then I would imagine that my audience consists of OT security experts, or at least practitioners, who might be frustrated and might be looking for a way out, a new idea, a new strategy. And why would I want to educate that particular audience about what OT security is? I would imagine that they know already what OT security is and what the best practices are, etc. Because if they didn't, they might not be interested to learn why it is broken. So that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but this is the one of these markers in this presentation, where you can really get a good idea of how the AI works. So it just assembles everything on the interwebs. And since a shit ton of presentations on OT security contain a slide like this, it's also in here. That is how the AI works these days. I can only hope that it's going to evolve pretty soon, because this already relates to the title of this webcast. And this is a good example of how the AI can really make you dumber, or at least it seems to be unaware that it alleges that this audience must be dumb. They're so dumb. They don't even know what OT security is, yet they come to this talk or to this presentation in the interest of learning why it is broken. So that's a concern here. Okay, so what is OT security? You have seen that dozens or hundreds of times. We don't need to go through that. Slide 3, the stakes are high. Okay, so now we are doing a segue into the fear mongering. Okay, so how the cost of consequence is so high. I just jumped to the speaker notes at the bottom. When OT fails, it's not just data loss, it's lives and livelihoods. Well, As a matter of fact, no life has been lost due to an OT attack. But anyhow, it's just alleged here. And it won't surprise you because you have heard that over and over again, even though nobody has presented the receipts because there are none. Content. OT breaches cause physical harm, disrupted power, contaminated water, halted production. Examples. 2020, ransomware shut down US hospitals during COVID-19. Well, that may have been the case. However, it had nothing to do with OT. Just like that, right? So there was no connection, no logical connection from those ransomware attacks, and that still is the case. It's very similar to Oldsmar, to Colonial. IT operations are disrupted, and therefore they have to shut down the shop. As simple as that. No OT system is compromised. 2021, Oldsmar, Florida water treatment plant had attempted to poison water. This one is really, really good because it's so telling. So the alleged Oldsmar attack is debunked. It wasn't an attack. It was just some accidental mishap by an employee. It was legitimate access of an employee who certainly, as we know now, did not attempt to poison water. That is completely made up bullshit that you find on the internet, still in our circles, in the OT security community, because unfortunately, many of our so-called experts don't bother to actually fact check their allegations and their statements, etc. So if you pay close attention, you will have learned that it was no malicious activity involved here. It was not a hack, and it certainly was not an attempt to poison water. But still, it's being peddled because it's such a good point to build your case when you want to dramatize the potential cost of consequence of OT attacks. Economic impact, 6 billion in global losses from OT attacks. So estimated, yes, certainly estimated. This is just another BS number that you will never get any receipts for. Okay, visual map of major OT attacks or a timeline of incidents. I would have loved to see that timeline of incidents. And this is another one where I urge you to pay close attention to. So you will have seen those maps and timelines every so often. There pretty much any basic introductory OT security presentation, you will see that timeline, back in 2000, we had the water hack in Australia by our good man Vitek Boden, the Maroochydore attack, and then we had the Stuxnet and the this and that and the Colonial pipeline. So what I urge you to do, check the pure number of incidents that you are presented, and you may or may not take into account that more than half of these alleged OT security incidents aren't OT security incidents at all because they did not involve OT, such as Colonial. However, even if you leave them in, you're usually presented, I don't know, let's just say 20 incidents. For the total history of factory automation globally. So that, just to put things into perspective, you're presented those 20 examples, of which at least 10 are bullshit. And what the presenter never realizes is, even if that was true, it would totally contradict the point, because the number is so low that it invalidates your whole argument. So there were, like in ancient history, there was this attack where the water was contaminated, right? So the sewage water was pumped into a river and then the fish died, okay? Yeah, okay, that did happen actually. We have proof for that. But if you consider that globally, we are talking about roughly 300 million industrial control systems, it really isn't a blip on the radar. So that's my point. And just to remain at this issue here for a second, this is usually the moment when many in my audience say, no, Ralph, you're totally dismissing the risk. No, I'm not. Guess what? I'm in OT security now for, I don't know, almost 30 years. And what do you imagine why I'm still here and why didn't I move on? Just playing golf or, I don't know, doing cooking shows on the internet, because I still think OT security is very, very important. I'm just saying that the way most people in OT security make their argument, that's wrong, because that didn't help us a lot. That got us to the sorry state of affairs that we find ourselves in. That's the core of my argument. I'm not dismissing the risk, even though I think you don't even need to stress the concept of risk. But that's the topic for another webcast. Okay, next slide. Why OT security is broken? Legacy system. Well, you have heard that over and over again. Most OT systems run outdated tech, proprietary protocols, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you have to give them that. It's certainly not what we are actually interested in, because this is another point that we have heard over and over again. This is not why OT security is broken. This is just the factual technical state of the infrastructure that does not imply that it couldn't be secured. While convergence with IT, well, we also have heard that already. WannaCry ransomware spread to OT systems. Okay, let's just skip that. Connecting OT to the internet was like opening Pandora's box without the security to match. So their argument here is IT-OT convergence exposes to internet-based threats all of our good control systems. And I think that's a bit too non-complex, if you will. So the real picture is a little bit more nuanced. So let's add this nuance here. Unfortunately, we have to face the fact that there are thousands of engineers out there who are so dumb that they actually connect their PLCs to the public internet. And this makes for the many cases of successful intrusions, because that PLC can be accessed by anybody with internet access. Okay, and the most recent example in my mind, in my memory, is that story about I think it was the Iranian hackers, and they just tried to disrupt the Israeli critical infrastructure by compromising some PLCs in fuel stations, right? Again, I've said it before, if you are so dumb that you connect your internet, well, then probably you deserve to be hacked just to learn a lesson. But fortunately, the number of engineers who fit into that category is very, very small compared to the whole population of engineers who are usually smart enough to not make such a stupid mistake. But certainly the other development that we see is that a lot of ICS, of industrial control systems and networks, are connected to the cloud, but that's a different thing. Unfortunately, our AI does not distinguish between those, right? So it simply alleges, well, internet, that's bad. And I would certainly make a strong difference between a cloud that can be reasonably secure and the public internet, which is obviously totally insecure. So next slide. Why OT security is broken? Human and organizational failures. So this is the next argument. Lack of cybersecurity training for staff, blah, blah, blah. Chart showing cybersecurity versus OT. Well, that's, for me, that's the first good idea, in my opinion, that they come up with, or that the AI comes up with. That used to be an argument that I made frequently in my consulting years. Well, let's just look at your IT security budget and compare that to your OT security budget. If there is a total disparity, like OT has a tenth of the IT cybersecurity budget, or even less, right? Why is that? Because in principle, you could make the argument, well, isn't the OT at least as important to our business than the IT systems? Well, or let's just say, word processors for HR, etc., are they more important than our PLCs? What's going on there? So, unfortunately, usually this argument is rarely made, and certainly nobody can present the numbers. But in my opinion, it's a good argument because it's going to tell you about this disparity. So, as I see it, these two budgets should somehow be balanced. If they are not, it tells you right away that this organization apparently does not put a lot of emphasis on OT security. And maybe they do so because management is under the impression that OT security is broken, which brings us back to the title of our presentation. Why are inadequate standards? Okay, so the AI tells us that standards are a starting point, but they're not keeping pace with adversaries. I don't buy the argument because if you ask me, I would say we have all the standards we need. We have more standards than we need. We have a standard of standards like the NIST cybersecurity framework. Or there is no lack of standards. And look at something like 62443. That is such a broad and detailed standard. Well, I don't see how it could get any better. And if you would ask me, I think the problem is not with the standards or that they would not keep up, like they lag behind threats. No, that's bullshit. The 2015 Ukraine power grid. So the argument here is, well, if the Ukraine in 2015 only had a solid standard, then this attack would not happen. That's complete bullshit. Compliance often treated as a checkbox, not as a robust strategy. Well, compliance is not a strategy. The compliance is you're either compliant or you're not, and when you want to assess the quality of your compliance or the potential value that it can give you, you have to look at the policies, but not at the audit, right? So you would have to check if the policies are sound, and you would also have to check if the policies are part of a security management system, where you do the reporting and then from there you improve, etc., etc. So, but overall, this to me does not make any sense. Inadequate standards. No, the standards are adequate. The problem is that the standards aren't followed. They are not implemented. It's the execution that is missing or lacking. Okay, and since they bring up Ukraine, I want to point you again to my take on the Ukrainian on the attack against the U.S. power on the attack against the Ukrainian power grid in 2015. You can see that we can find that on YouTube from 4 years ago. The most important lesson from the Ukraine cyber attack. Here I give you my take, and I also show, well, this could have been prevented easily. The other thing that I want to stress here is with the I think they also mentioned, did they already talk about Triton? No, I'll get back to that later. So that is not a thing. Standards are starting, okay. Real world evidence of failure. Colonial Pipeline, we have talked about that already. Triton malware, targeted safety systems in a Saudi petrochemical plant. Yes, that is correct. Any safety impact? No, zero. Right. So, and again, because we have been talking about standards, I urge you to check out this very good presentation of Mr. Gutmanis at S4 Triton, a report from the trenches, because Gutmanis shows you or argues in detail about the blatant lack of basic network security at that site. And the beauty is he was there. So he has the receipts. And I find this very, very interesting and worth your time. SolarWinds supply chain attack compromised OT vendors. No, nothing happened out of that. Expos highlight ongoing OT vulnerabilities. Yes, certainly. Well, you can find a ton of expos on OT vulnerabilities, but they don't actually matter. Blah, blah, blah. These aren't isolated incidents. They are proof of systemic fragility. No, they're not. This is another bullshit argument. They don't prove anything systemic. The fragility, yes, in my book, Robust Control System Networks, the first chapter of that book introduces the term of cyber fragility and what it means for OT. So they got the point there, but I don't think that the AI has read my book. Otherwise, it would probably not talk about systemic fragility. And consequence of inaction, blah, blah, 30% rise in OT incidents per industry reports. Once more, when it comes to incident numbers, and you see, and a steep increase, like 30% increase, always ask about the absolute numbers, my friends. And you will be surprised because usually the presenter doesn't know about the absolute numbers. If they present some absolute numbers, you say, well, no, that's 15. That's not a lot. Do we actually only have 50? No. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So you get the point. Graph of rising OT attacks or a domino effect graphic. So that is another. I think you get it that at this stage we are totally lost in fear mongering. Very interesting. The domino effect, like the systemic failure, the dominoes, that is totally made up bullshit, and it only addresses the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If we don't act, the next attack could dwarf past incidents. Fixing OT path forward, modernize systems, blah, blah, train people, strengthen standards, public-private partnerships. You have heard that over and over again. And call to action. Stakeholders must act now. Governments, industry. I think we're acting already. So we're acting for a couple of years, for many years. Problem is with this topic that we wanted to address. Apparently, we were not successful with our acting. So and we don't get any real good advice on what we should change with reasonable expectations of improvement, because I think at this point it's totally clear. Everything you heard so far, you have heard over and over and over again. There's nothing new. So we did all of that already. We acted already. We have the standards, we have the awareness, we have all of that. But still we are in deep shit. And this presentation didn't help us, unfortunately. Start with SolarWinds, blah, 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 advocate for funding. That's probably, well, that is my takeaway here. So we are totally underfunded, and this is what we have to change. Let's rebuild OT security for the next crisis. Well, if you ask many in the audience, well, the crisis is always ongoing. So funding is lacking, and that is what you should focus on. Anyhow, so my bottom line here is, if you ask this man, this is a good example of how the AI really makes you dumber. You didn't learn anything new. In another twist, you could also say, well, it's going to be interesting, because just consider how many presentations of that same caliber you have seen and heard over the last decade or 2 decades. And so it's going to be interesting because all of these experts obviously can now be replaced with the AI. Right? I mean, certainly I would allege that many of those experts did a lot of copy and pasting in the past. But I just predict that, well, this is certainly going to have an impact, unfortunately, not really in a helpful way, because if this nonsense is perpetuated now with the help of technology, it really doesn't help us. What we do need is fresh ideas based on first principles, right? And realizing that all of that existing stuff that we did in the past 2 decades, well, it didn't really work that well. So what could we do differently? And this is something that obviously the AI doesn't tell us, because the AI doesn't know. Since it does not reason based on first principles, it just assembles everything it can find. And if what it finds is BS, then the result that you're being presented will also be BS. That's as simple as that. So I leave you with these concerning, unpleasant thoughts, and we'll see each other again in a week. Bye-bye.